Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Leonelle Thompson, and I am the Assistant Dean and Director of the Business Career Center in the TU Collins College of Business. Today's webinar is being co-hosted with the TU Center for Student Academic Support. This is a part of their programming series for workshops for students, so we're very excited to partner with them and to bring you this workshop and webinar on hacking the internship and job search process. So before we begin, I want to go over a few webinar housekeeping items. First off, everyone is muted, so that just helps us to reduce the background noise. It helps us to reduce any distractions we may have, but we do encourage participation, and you can do that through asking a question in the chat area. So on the bottom of your screen that you see, that if you're viewing the slides and you're logged in through the Zoom link, you will see an area that says chat, a button that says chat, and one that says Q&A. You can type your questions in those areas throughout the presentation. If you called in, so you're only on your phone, feel free to email questions to bus-career@utulsa.edu. I just noticed a typo on the slide, so for the time, but we're gonna start questions after about the 30-minute mark. And so to make sure we have enough time to answer all the questions that are presented. So just know that the questions will be asked towards the end of the presentation, but feel free to type them as you go. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be available on the Business Career Center YouTube channel that you can see the link there, and you can type in TU Business Career Center into YouTube, and all our videos should pop up from not just this webinar, but also from the ones we've done in the previous days and last week. Upon exiting the webinar, you will be prompted to take a short survey, so I ask that you fill it out. It's only 5 questions, so please fill that out just to give us some feedback on today's webinar. And keeping with our webinar tradition, we are going to do 2 giveaways, and they are each for a Grubhub gift card. So you will be notified via email if you are the winner, or phone number if you called in, and that will be an e-gift card. So it will be emailed to you, and you can use support local businesses, stay in, but also get you some good food as well. So as always, I think I speak on behalf of all our faculty and staff when I say, students, we do miss you. We wish you the best, and hopefully this passes over soon so we can all be back on campus. All right, so let's talk about the internship and job process. Now, I will tell you there's a lot of information in this presentation. We may go a little longer than the 40 minutes, but know that I am recording. If you have to jump off for some reason, you can view the webinar later on our YouTube channel and to get what you missed. But the process to find an internship and job can be overwhelming. It can be very intimidating. It is for always changing. Never has there been a prime example than what we're going through right now. And so when I talk about hacking, I talk about it in the sense of developing a strategy or a technique for managing the activity or the time and more efficiently and more effectively. So, you know, we're not breaking into code or anything, but we are coming up with best practices on how we should be moving through this process. So throughout this, I am going to talk about internships and jobs. I'll use them interchangeably. I'll highlight where a job may come into play versus an internship and some of the items within the process. So you can see there's about 6 steps that I've identified, and they're all interwoven. So you could be at any of these at any point on this process, this cycle, at multiple times, you know, starting over. So you're kind of intertwining, weaving in and out of each of the particular processes and each of the steps within the process. So we're going to walk through each of these. Again, if you have questions, feel free to chat those in the Q&A and also through the chat box. So getting ready, this is what I call the first step in the process, usually the one that's the most overlooked. And so when we think about getting ready, a lot of things come to mind. This is a part of your branding, your personal branding, who you are, the unique skill sets that you bring. It's also a time where you get that experience. You know, there's no saying you have to have experience to get experience. This is where you're thinking through what are the experiences I have? What have I been working on? This is where you're doing your research. This is where you're putting together your documents. Probably outside of applying and actually working, the most time-consuming process. Again, this is one that a lot of people skip over. So when we think about getting experience and gaining experience, I want you to remember your student organizations and volunteer organizations. A lot of times we think it has to be experience related to your particular major. It doesn't. It needs to be experience where employers are really focusing on those transferable skills that you gain in being a part of a student organization or volunteering. You also want to decide your major or your graduate program if you're in graduate school. If you're more experienced, you want to think about what are some of the experiences you have had in working. What are some of that, you may not necessarily be focused on your major because you've changed careers, but what's the equivalent of a major for an experienced hire? And that would be jobs you've had, job titles you've had, responsibilities. As students, think about what you've gained in work study positions. Always update your Handshake and LinkedIn profiles. That's just a way to network, getting you ready for that. Those of you who have been in my class know I love the book called Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty, which is all about networking. And so having those profiles updated and those networks allow you to tap into that well before you need to in applying for an internship or job. Think about your GPA. If you're a freshman, you want to make sure you're keeping that GPA up. We like to see above a 3.0 on resumes. I will say employers are not focused so much on the GPAs, which is fantastic. But you don't want it to be low. You want it to be, doable and within a range of, I say, at least a 2.7 to 3.5 to apply for certain internships and jobs. Think about your skills and interests. So in the next slide, I talk about a skills and interest assessment to kind of help guide you of where you should be looking. Like I mentioned, this is a time commitment to do all this to get ready. Know your story. Be able to answer the question, tell me about yourself. If you were on the webinar back on March 30th, there was a presentation about video introductions as a great way to add that to your resume, where so much focus is on the resume to get you in the door for an interview, but you have so much more depth than maybe that piece of paper can tell you. And so having something, a video, a link that someone can go to tell you a little bit more about yourself. I will say this is also the question that stumps a lot of people in interviews, and we'll talk about that a little later. Job descriptions, deciphering a job description. What can I apply to? What can't I? So I talk about that a little later as well. Doing research on companies and opportunities. Keep in mind, so if you were on the webinar from April 1st about LinkedIn, keep in mind 80% of jobs and internships are never posted. So researching companies, researching those opportunities goes back to networking. Also, preparing your documents. A lot of times we wait until it's time to apply, and then we start working on our resume or our cover letters or getting our transcript or references. That needs to already be set up and ready to go before you start applying. So this getting ready phase is a great time to do that, would be in the summer. A lot of companies still recruit heavily in the fall. We are seeing that lifted a little bit more and more companies coming in the spring, throughout the school year, summer, a lot more just-in-time hiring, but you don't want to wait until it's time to start applying to try to get all these documents together. And again, going along with your branding, go ahead and set up your voicemail greeting. And this is the greeting that people will get if they can't reach you and your voicemail kicks in. It should not be the factory greeting. It needs to tell your name, that they reached you, and to leave a message. A lot of employers have stated that they will not leave a message if they don't know they got the right person. So if there's nothing in your voicemail that says your name, they don't know if they misdialed, if it's just a factory greeting. And a lot of people miss out on opportunities because of that. Also, create an email signature that's going to include your name, your school, your major, graduate program you're in, contact information, email address, phone number, how someone can reach you. When you send an email, we'll talk about direct connection in a second, but when you send that email and that's forwarded on, a lot of things drop off. They may not necessarily have your email address that it was from you, but if it's in your signature, that will more than likely stay. So someone can still reach out to you, because you never know what happens to an email after you send one. So this is all the getting ready stage. A lot of stuff involved in that. So we're going to go a little bit more in depth on some of these items. So this is the skills assessment, skills and interest assessment I was talking about. When you think about what should I be looking for, what kind of jobs, what kind of internships, I want you to throw out the myth that you are only to pursue opportunities that are within your major. I don't want you to limit yourself in that regard. I want you to err on being too broad. Unless you know exactly what you want to do, who you want to do it for, and where you want to do it, most of us are not like that. And so you want to think about your skills that you have and also your interest. And so think also long-term and short-term. So in the short term, I maybe just want to look for an internship, maybe something that's, just for the summer, just to see if this is a great fit for me major-wise. I'm not sure. I'm not going to think about the major. I just want to know I'm interested in this. And so you want to rank those and see in this matrix here where you should be given consideration and what you should avoid. If you don't have the skills and you have zero interest, you don't want to be in the third box there. You just want to avoid all those jobs and internships. But think too about how this helps you to uncover opportunities and maybe take you in new directions you didn't think about. And so as we think about employers and we think about what they're looking for, I want you to also know that most entry-level jobs require analytical and communication skills, more so than the content that you may have mastered with your specific major. So said another way, they're looking for you to communicate what it is you want, communicate that you are willing to learn the abilities or the responsibilities associated with a particular job, especially at the entry level, more so than I was an XYZ major. And so hopefully that helps you when you start thinking about where you want to search and what companies you want to search with, to broaden it up a little bit more than not focus so much on just your particular major or just your particular field. If you're changing careers and you're maybe more mid-level, again, your major is not going to come into play. Your skills and interests will be, and that's going to also demonstrate itself in your prior work experience if you are changing jobs mid-career. So let's talk about job descriptions. I get more questions on job descriptions than anything. Just like, what's the purpose of a job description? So the job description its main purpose is just to outline the main duties and responsibilities of a job. It kind of helps guide the job seeker into what what might appeal to them. So there are going to be some skills listed. There are going to be some certain requirements. Usually jobs are going to be broken down. They'll tell you about the company, tell you about the organization, and then talk about the qualifications that are needed and what employers are really kind of looking for as part of those duties and responsibilities. So a required qualification is something you'll need. So that's the first pass at a resume to see if they want to bring you in for an interview. If you have all the required qualifications, they'll bring you in. You've passed like the first pass. So in this particular job description, you can see here are the internship requirements. So if you have any of these, so college junior, senior, studying public relations or marketing, proficiency with Office, Adobe, Google Suite. So these are the ones you need to have to apply for the particular position. Other times they're going to list preferred qualifications. And these are the ones they're great if you have it, but it's not going to knock you out if you don't. These are, I always like to call, these are when they're looking for the unicorn. So it would be great, but if you don't have them, that's okay. But here's the required ones under this block. And so employers get, funny and creative with what they call them. So here it's bonus points if you, so that would be a preferred qualification. And then you'll be successful in this role is their way of saying required qualifications. My rule of thumb is if you are a recent grad, you can apply for anything if it lists a year, 3 years or less. It was totally fine for you to apply to because that's considered entry level. And that's what you're going for is that entry level position. So don't get hung up on the difference between required and preferred. You just need to meet required. And don't get hung up, especially on the years needed, especially if you're like, I was a student all this time. What am I supposed to do? So just another way to hack that, apply. And there's no harm in applying, so the worst they can do is just, not have you come in for an interview. So you're no worse off at that point. So just keep that in mind when looking at job descriptions. So let's get into documents. So even in our very advanced world of technology, it still comes down to about 2 pieces of paper as far as getting you an interview with an organization to move you on to the next step for hopefully employment. And that's the resume and cover letter. Other documents you might need would be a transcript, a portfolio of work, depending on what type of work you're wanting to do, and also a list of references. So just as a side note, your list of references should never be on your resume. So you don't need to say references are available upon request. Employers who see that, this is again just another hack, just something for you to know. Employers who see that know that you probably did not have your resume reviewed. And so that's just a telltale sign of it used to be popular to put that on your resume. When I was a student, you would put that. Now you don't, because the references are a totally different list that are requested upon request. The best advice I can give you on this is have these documents reviewed before you start applying. That's why they're first in this cycle under the getting ready piece of the process. A lot of times I hear students and even some of our alumni say, I've been out there applying to this many jobs, this many internships, and I haven't heard anything back. Can you take a look at my resume? And at that point, it's almost too late. I mean, it's never too late, but at that point, you have all these applications out there, and maybe there was something, just a little bit of tweaking needed on the resume, or you sent out a generic cover letter and, you're not getting noticed. And there could be other reasons as well, but you want to keep in mind, these are things you need to have reviewed before you start applying. So let's talk about resumes. And I know some of this might be a refresher for many of you, but again, it's always great to just keep these in mind, especially in this given time of a lot of people are going to be looking for internships and jobs, and we want to make sure you stand out. So for that resume, the main purpose is to get you an interview. It's not to get you a job, it's to get you an interview, especially a professional in a professional field. I recommend 1 page for current students and recent grads. It can be longer for experienced seekers. So if you have 5 or more years of work experience, but I want you to keep in mind the average person's attention span. So a lot of times employers will scan a resume, takes them about 8 to 10 seconds. So even if you have a lot of experience and you can put that into 1 page, that's great. I personally have a 3-page resume I switched careers and from oil and gas accounting to what I do now. But I just want you to keep that in mind, the average person's attention span. One little tip, a hack that knocks a lot of people out and you never even realize it: never email or attach your resume as a Microsoft Word version to any application. It should always be a PDF. And the reason for that is you don't know what version of Word people use, and it can get totally messed up. All your pretty formatting could be totally undone because of the version of Word that someone's using. A PDF makes it stick, it's nice, it's professional, it screams professionalism. So if you think back to your brand, what you're trying to convey and communicate in this piece of paper, the fact that you sent it a PDF or attached it a PDF, it speaks volumes. Also, your file name should not just be resume. While that helps you on your iCloud Drive and your documents, you know what it is. It needs to have some version of your name. And I recommend just a simple first and last name resume. You don't want to reference the year. You don't want to reference the spring 2020 resume, just first and last name, especially when you send it. If you have another nomenclature that you use when saving it, for your purposes, that's fine. But for sending it and actually applying, you want a first and last name resume. Again, it could be forwarded. It's printed out of systems. You never know what happens to it. Your cover letter, I also call those cover emails. If an application asks for one, you need to include it, and it must be specific to the job or internship you're applying for. This is where a lot of people get in trouble. They send the generic cover letter and email. I'm interested in an internship position at your company. I'm interested in a full-time position. Reach out to me. And that's just not going to cut it. So cover letters divide a lot of employers. Some love them, some don't. But if someone's asking for it, you need to send it. Your transcript, an unofficial copy is okay. You can get that from WebAdvisor. Students go through a lot to get transcripts, so much. So employers are very lenient in the unofficial copy that you can download from either self-service or WebAdvisor. Your portfolio of work, it depends on the job, and this could include research you've done, papers you've published, designs you've created. I know our graphic designer majors have a lot of work that they've done. And so you just want to keep that in mind and think about the best way to display that. Sometimes it's a website. Sometimes it's actually having, attaching that in a PDF version and other documents on an application. Or if you're emailing it to someone, a website or an attachment would work as well. And your list of references. Again, another document to include. And with your list of references, you want to make sure it's someone who can talk about your experiences. You don't necessarily want them to be family members. Family members sometimes are a little too close. You want them to be able to talk about your experience as a future employee, someone who will answer a phone call or an email. A lot of times our references are awesome, but your coworkers or your former bosses who may not answer an email timely or a phone call. And you also want to include on your list of references how you knew them, for how long, and what capacity, and contact information for them. Again, make sure it's the most relevant, up-to-date contact information, and you want to always ask your reference before putting them down. So keeping on the trend of resumes, just a few things to include here. If you're a recent grad, your contact information, your education, you might have to add relevant coursework. A lot of times, majors are called different things. Degrees are called different things. So you may want to include your coursework as well. GPA, if it's above a 3.0, I'm a big fan of the major GPA. So a lot of times we take a lot of courses that don't really relate to our major. So if you want to include a GPA, maybe your major GPA is higher, you can totally just designate major GPA on the resume. You want to include skills. This is also technical and what I call essential skills. Those essential skills being the soft skills of working with people, teamwork, technical, any programming that you may have, experience, activities, languages, honors awards, and research. If you're an experienced hire, your resume is going to flip a little bit, and you'll see the order I've listed it, and that education is downplayed depending on your years of experience. If you've been out of school for now more than 5 years, it should not be the thing leading off your resume. You have some work experience, and this is out of school, you have graduated. And so education won't be the leading thing on your resume. It's going to be a summary statement, a listing of qualification, and those career highlights. And then on the next slide, I do have an example for each. So this is just a look at a current or student or recent grad, the order. Of course, your contact information is at the top. And then for an experienced one, and these are actually students we had at the University of Tulsa, but you can see the difference in the resume, what it's focusing on, professional highlights, that kind of thing. Just some to-dos. Again, a lot of this stuff, this is what knocks you out. So if you're not getting interviews, chances are you've probably violated one of these things. Make sure you have good use of space on the resume. Again, we don't have really long attention spans, so we don't want to be bombarded with a lot of words. We want to see your use of space. Think about how many words are on a one line. So if you have a sentence and then 2 words drop to the other line, that's not a good use of space. Could it be said in one line? Chances are yes. And so how would you reword it? Think about your spelling and grammar. Avoid personal pronouns. We never say I, me, or my on a resume. Emphasize results, quantify when you can. So, even on things like volunteer opportunities, if you worked at the food bank, volunteered at the food bank, how many bags did you fill? How many people did you help? Who all was there? Definitely quantify those. Use action words to start. So again, you're starting off your statements with action words and action verbs. Use the appropriate verb tense. So again, this is just having it reviewed. If you're currently working at a position, you would use present tense. If it's something in the past, you would use past tense when you're using those action words. So, led versus leading, or leads. Avoid repetition. So you don't want to use the same action word or every single bullet point under experience. So change it up. Use bold and italics, but don't overuse it. Bold and italics help to make things stand out, but if everything is bolded and everything is italicized, it just looks a little unprofessional, actually very unprofessional. So again, great time to get everything reviewed and get some feedback on that. Also use fonts consistently. So your fonts should never change. They can change size, but your font itself should never change. And that needs to be on every single document associated with you, from your resume, your cover letter, to your references, to even how you introduce your portfolio. Your fonts need to be the same. It's just adding an extra little bit to help you stand out. You'll be surprised how many people don't do that. So if you do it, you will definitely stand out. Cover letters, it introduces the resume. So a lot of people hate cover letters. I go back and forth on them. They're usually the hardest thing to write, but it introduces the resume. And one size does not fit all on this. So you have to be specific to the job or internship you're applying for, which means you need to address it to someone in the organization. So if you write to whom it may concern, it's probably going to be thrown in the trash. If you need help addressing it to someone, it doesn't have to be the hiring manager. It could be anyone in that organization, because again, what this is all showing is that you went the extra mile, you did some research. I've helped many students who've come in my office, and we go through LinkedIn, we go through Handshake, we find somebody to address it to. If you can find the hiring manager, that's great. A lot of times that's not always known. And so you just don't want to write to whom it may concern. You also want to indicate how you heard about the position. Did you hear about someone there? Did you see it posted? Companies like to know, what's working, who's out there. If you mention someone, they may get a referral bonus for if you get hired. The link, it's a letter. It is one page only, no exceptions, and 4 paragraphs maximum. So your first paragraph is introducing how you heard about it. You're restating what you're applying for, because nowhere else in the letter does it say that. It could get disjointed from your resume or from the application that you filled out. So you want to always state what you're applying for. You also want to also request, talk about your skills in the second paragraph. Third and fourth paragraph, you're wrapping it up, doing a call to action. You don't want to regurgitate the resume. So you don't want to go through and say, I've worked as an oil and gas accountant for many years at ConocoPhillips. This is what I did. You want to take out the skills. A great place to fill in on a cover letter is looking at those job descriptions. What are they asking for in the roles and responsibilities? And you talk about that in the cover letter. If they're asking for you to know you're going to have to do a branding campaign, talk about how you successfully implemented a branding campaign. You don't talk about where, because that's on the resume, but use that kind of verbiage on your cover letter. Same header as the resume. So if you have a centered header on the resume, one that's left justified, that's what you would use. Same contact information. And then also the same font you would use that you used on your resume. All right, we're moving on to the next step. And like I said, there's a lot of information. So I know we were going to do questions at the end. I see a few popping up, so I'll make sure we answer those. So applying. The biggest step in applying is actually just doing it. Some of the best advice that my mother and my grandparents gave me growing up was you just need to do it. Procrastination stops a lot of people. And growing up, what they always would tell me was a man wished and hoped every day that he would win the lottery. And that was great, but he never bought a lottery ticket. And so that's the same for applying for jobs and internships. You have to apply to be able to be at least thrown in the hat in the mix for even possibly getting one. You can't just apply online nowadays. You're going to have to make a connection. A lot of things that trip people up is also when you apply online, you submit incomplete applications, which with all the technology and everything, it scans it, it'll know if something's missing. So submit everything that is asked for, even if you don't think it's needed. If they ask for a cover letter, they ask for a transcript, you need to submit it. Making that connection when applying, I always recommend email directly. And so, but you don't want to overdo it. So if, again, a lot of jobs are not posted, jobs and internships are not posted. So you want to definitely email someone to say, what's the best way to do that? You may not know their email address. You can always guess. Companies make it pretty easy for you to guess their email. Usually first name.last name at thecompany.com is the most common combo. you can reach out to your career centers, and we more than likely can find a contact, either using Handshake, or we may just actually know them. Get referrals. So from the Career Center, your professors, family, friends, LinkedIn, Handshake, to refer you to different jobs. People sending you to different jobs, internships. It's a great way to apply. And then I always recommend, once you apply online, go ahead and email the contact. So if you're applying through Handshake and the contact is there, follow up with an email that says, I just applied to the position, just want to let you know. I look forward to hearing from you. It shows just that extra step that a lot of people don't do. If you have a referral, once you have applied, go back to the person that referred you and let them know that you applied, so they too can start working on your behalf and following up. So now it's time to talk about interviewing in the next step. So the best thing you can do for an interview is to prepare. So that's usually through mock interviews. You're going to encounter varying types of interviews. Behavioral is the most common, and that's where they're going to ask you questions on how you behaved in the past as an indication of how you will behave if a future situation arises. This is not a would've or a should've or what you should have done. This is, what did you do? How did you handle the situation? And one way to conquer that is to think about the STAR method, which is answering with the situation, the task, the action, and the results. This is where mock interviews come in very handy to help you prepare for that. I sat through a lot of interviews in my former career as a recruiter, where people would just not answer using this method, and it knocks you out of the running. So definitely do STAR method. Some interviews are going to be informal. This is, you go out for coffee, they ask you kind of what your goals are. You may think it's not an interview, but it is. And then case studies, some industries, I know the State Department does this, where they give you a case study or actual situation where you acted out, you have a time limit, and you come back with the result. Interview mediums, these are definitely changing now with social distancing. Phone usually used to be the first kind of screening. They liked your resume, they just want to know a little bit more about you. Video is very, very much the new thing. It will be for a long time. One way is where you record yourself and send them the answers via something like HireVue. So a question pops up, you record yourself, and then you submit those in a given time frame. Two-way is similar to an in-person interview, but it's conducted via Skype or Zoom, so you are talking back and forth with the person on video. And of course, there's in-person, which is non-video, and you can have panel, multiple interviewers, and it's all in person. One thing I will say about all this, with the one-way interviews, you have to do it within the time frame. There's a time limit on that. That catches a lot of people. Be sure, if you're not sure about what that time limit is, it should be in an email you get. Follow up with that recruiter and ask. On the two-way, confirm that time, because the time zones could be different depending on where you are, depending on how their system is set up. So again, things to think about when you're going through the process. Always show up early. So that's for in-person or video. Get on early on the video. Make sure you test out the technology, and then greet everyone. So if you're in person, always greet if there's a greeter. Greet others who may be involved in the process, because they do compare notes afterwards on how friendly you may have been. So when you're interviewing, you want to think about the tough questions. Again, the one that always trips everyone up is, tell me about yourself. Be prepared. Don't be robotic. You're talking about what you can bring to an organization. You're talking about why they should hire you in that beginning. Talk about, maybe if you get a question about why is your GPA not on your resume, explain to them. And it could be simple as, I took some block classes that just really were not for me, and it brought my GPA down. Why should I hire you? Think through that question. What are your weaknesses? I like for students and those seeking jobs and changing careers, think about it from the standpoint of switching it around, and here's a coaching point, and here's how I'm overcoming that, right? I mean, we all have points that we want to work on, so address it in that way. And then, where do you see yourself in 5 years? This also can help you answer this in a mock interview. Because a lot of people like to say, I want to own my own company in 5 years, but you're interviewing with the company. And so what you just told them is in 5 years, you're not going to be around working for them. So you want to really work on that answer and where do you see yourself? Think about it in a more general sense. Or if you want to stay with that company, you want to progress up through the ranks. That's totally acceptable answer. Following up, before you leave, inquire about next steps. When can I expect to hear from you on the next steps? When can I expect the decision? Take notes. So you should always go to an interview with a Padfolio, a notepad, take down some notes. So then when you are going back over, getting ready to send the thank you notes, you have notes to refer back to. And that's important because you want to send thank you notes, and email is totally okay, to everyone you interviewed with. You want to do that within 24 hours, and you want to note something you talked about in the interview. And so I think on the next slide, I have an example about what to do. And you want to continue to follow up if you haven't heard, but that's going to depend on what the interviewer told you. So if they said the decision is not going to be for 2 weeks, you don't need to follow up until after that 2 weeks has passed. Again, a lot of things, that's one of the things that throws a lot of people out of the running for a position is they followed up too soon. So don't do that. After 2 weeks has passed, you can go ahead and follow up. Just wanted to check in to see if there's any progress on a decision being made. And then here's an example of a thank you note. I like to play golf, so I mentioned the golf pro at Paige Belcher, but just talking about how small a world it is, and then that you look forward to the next conversation. So again, bringing in something from the conversation you had with that particular interviewer. So let's talk about the decision-making process. So ghosting does happen. It happens from the employer, and it's horrible, and I dislike it strongly, but it does happen. And so, but you don't want to be in the situation where you are the ghoster. So, which means as a candidate, you need to answer your emails and your phones timely. If an employer is ghosting you, they pretty much made the decision for you, and it's time to move on. Again, I don't agree with that. I don't like that, but not everyone is professional, and it does happen. How do you handle rejection? Chances are it will come. You won't get every job that you or internship you apply for, but you want to be professional. And you want to send a note of appreciation. Again, that shows your professionalism. If you're still under consideration, I wouldn't reach out via social media. So if everyone around you has heard and they've been rejected, or right after an interview, I wouldn't reach out on social media as a way to keep in contact. You want to do that after you've been rejected. It's a great way to keep in touch, and people, they keep your resume and everything on file. So they may circle back to you. They'll see what you're doing on LinkedIn. That's the only social media I would recommend. I wouldn't try to track down an interviewer on Facebook or anything. But handle it professionally, send a note of appreciation, and it's a really great time to build a relationship. I want to stop here, and let's see, no questions, so I'll keep going. Acceptance, know the timeline and preferred method of accepting. If you need more time, please ask. The worst thing you can do is accept because you feel some sort of pressure and you didn't ask for more time, and then you have to rescind that acceptance. That's not good. So if you need more time because you're going back to school, so it's a return internship offer, or you're moving towards a full-time position and you just need more time to think about it, and in all honesty, maybe more time to apply for other positions, just ask for more time. Employers are used to that. So don't think that you're, putting them out by asking for that. You want to get the offer in writing. Usually it's going to be email. No one mails you anything. And after the acceptance is acknowledged, you need to go ahead and decline your other offers. Don't try to play the game of, I'm going to keep this person waiting and not respond just in case. Once you've accepted, you're off the table for other offers. If you need to decline an offer, you need to decline that in writing. Again, email's totally fine, unless there's a preferred method in the offer letter. And follow up with a phone call with people who help you. One of the great examples I love to use was helping an MBA student who wanted to move out of state. And so we set up some time with her to meet with a firm out of state. She ended up not accepting that position, but she followed up with me to let me know that, and here's why. And that was greatly appreciated because I would be more than willing to help her again in the future. Salary negotiations. That's part of the decision-making process. As an intern, there's really no reason to negotiate a salary. That's usually set. It's hourly. there's no benefits usually associated with that. But for full-time positions, you want to definitely do your research, have other alternatives in mind if the salary itself doesn't come to be. So think about other benefits, other things that you might want, like vacation or time off. You want to be confident, but you also want to be, in addition to, you want to be grateful to the opportunity that is there. You don't demand a negotiation, you ask if they're willing to negotiate. And so this is just an example of how you would state that. Email always works best. Please don't catch anyone off guard. Again, you're showing your professionalism. Email them, ask if you could talk about the offer. You don't want to start negotiating until you have an offer in hand, so you know what the compensation or the salary is. Eventually, you are going to have to discuss it in person or via phone. And keep in mind that when you send that email, that contact you're emailing may not be the one to make the decision. It might have to go to the hiring manager, the group that you're going to be working in, the budget it might come out of, and you may be talking to a human resources person. So don't get discouraged if you don't hear for a while. They're probably running all the process and everything through to make sure that everyone who needs to be involved in the decision is involved. Working, so we've gone through, you've gotten a job, you've gotten an internship. A lot of times we forget about performing on the job. So this is just a reminder to maintain your professional etiquette. You're going to be working with others. You're going to be working with others who have different opinions and different personalities than you. So you want to keep that in mind. You want to keep that in mind. You're not going to be friends with all your coworkers, and that's okay. You never want to disrespect anyone. You never want to be a problem person. But just remember that professional etiquette, there's certain rules, policies, and procedures at your place of work. You want to make sure you adhere to them. Again, you're standing out, and this is something that you want to put on your resume, hopefully. You can learn something from every experience. Think about your assignments. Again, always, thinking about what's next. So what is it I gained from this experience? What can I quantify? What did I achieve? Performance agreements, thinking about your accomplishments. Did you have a mentor? Mentors are great, either formal or informal, to help you navigate some of the nuances of the workplace. If you do not have a performance agreement, even as an intern, you need to ask about it. This is the agreement you have between you and your supervisor on the work you're going to do and how you're going to do it and how you're going to be evaluated on how you did it. And you don't want that to be a surprise. Even as an intern at the end of an internship, you don't want that to be a surprise to you. So think about that. Full-time employees, think about how performance agreements, they relate to promotions. So you're going to get a rating that's going to play into whether or not you get promoted, either with a salary, a title, all of those things. So your performance agreement, you play a huge part of it. It should never be dictated to you. So let's talk about what's next. And I know I'm running over on time. I thank you all for staying with me on this. There's a lot of information. So what's next? You might decide you want to leave an organization. And these are just some of the reasons why you might want to. Higher pay, career advancement, you want to choose a less stressful job. Your reason is your reason. And so you don't ever feel bad about that. There are different types of leaving. So it could be voluntary. You decide it's time to leave, you resign, or it's just the natural end to an internship. So the summer has come to an end. You decide to leave, so you resign for a full-time position. Involuntary takes the form of many things of you not being asked back. So maybe it is the situation of a second internship for that particular company that you're not asked back for, or full-time employment after an internship, so it doesn't convert to a full-time. You could be in an employment, an organization that's employed in an at-will state, meaning an employee can be terminated at any time without any reason, explanation, or warning. You could experience what we call severances, which are layoffs, mergers and acquisitions, just relate in too many people, or, just times get hard and people have to get let go. Whatever the situation may be, know the company policies, know what's afforded to you, what's granted to you, especially in the involuntary time. If you do resign voluntarily, You need to do it professionally. I had a coworker once who just wrote "I quit" on her whiteboard and walked out. That's not the best way to do that. Don't do that. You want to submit a letter of resignation. You want to be professional, because you are probably going to put this job on your resume, and you want to leave on good terms. This is just my public service announcement about what not to do. So don't ever rescind a job offer acceptance. I hear about those all the time. I don't like those. This is where you've accepted a job or internship, and then you decide, oh, just kidding, I don't want to do that. So you go back on it. Employers hate that. It does happen, but employers hate it. And you might have a perfectly good reason. We try to stay away from this. And if you must do it, you need to call first and then follow up in writing, and also state your reasoning why. It could be health issues. It could be a variety of things. But know that employer was probably counting on you to come. And so it's kind of thrown them into a whirlwind, where, especially on the timing that you do it. So what might happen is you might have burned a bridge. It could result in maybe a burned bridge with the relationship if it's through the university in that regard. So you just want to be careful. Again, I know there are reasons that you would have to do this, but again, you want to avoid it. And one way to avoid it is quickly accepting something and not asking for that time to go through and think about the offer, so you don't get in a situation where, in your mind, a better offer comes along and then you have to rescind the original one. So that's just a few things to think about with going through the next steps process. So again, this process, I know there's a lot of information in there. We do have a question. The slides will be available. Yes, this is one where I will definitely send out the slides to everyone who's on the Zoom meeting. But just, there's so many steps in the process. There's so many things that you have to think about. I wanted to take some time to go through micro internships. I don't have time for that now. So I will put together a presentation on micro internships and working remotely. It is very, very relevant to the time that we're in now. If you want to stay on and want me to go through that, just shoot out a chat or a Q&A. If you have the time, I do too, we can go through that. But I want to go ahead and get to some of the Q&A that we do have. Just a reminder of virtual events from the Career Center for Career Development and Professional Engagement. They have events coming up every Wednesday in April. And so now we're to the Q&A portion. Thank you guys for staying with me. I like to talk, and so this is great. Okay, so we have a few people who will stay on for the micro internships and working remotely, so we will do that. So could you repeat the STAR method, please? Absolutely. So the STAR method is for behavioral-based interviews. And behavioral-based interviews are those interviews that focus on understanding you talking about how you performed in a previous situation, and gives the employer an indication of how you will perform in a similar situation. And so the S stands for situation, which means when you're answering these questions, you start off with stating what the situation is. The T is the task. So what were the tasks you were tasked with? What were you trying to achieve? The A is the action. So what actions did you take in an effort to achieve the task and the results? And then the R is the results. So how did it turn out? And so sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, but you need to make sure you complete that answer with the results. When students, and even not just students, when people start answering these questions, a lot of times they forget the results. And so an example would be of a question would be, tell me about a time where you had to work with a difficult person. You'll know it's a behavioral-based interview because they'll say, tell me about a time, give me a situation when you, so you know you have to dig into something that you have already done and how you approached it. Another thing I forgot to mention on the interview slide, it's okay to ask when you get an interview what type of interview it'll be. You don't want to be thrown off, especially if it's going to be more than one person. In the interview, ask, is it going to be more behavioral based? If the timing is over 30 minutes, you can guarantee it's going to be a behavioral based interview. So hopefully that answers your question. But yeah, a great way to practice these and get feedback is to have a mock interview. When I do mock interviews with students, I actually write down STAR, and everything a student says, I put it by one of those letters, and we go back over it. and you want to have your answers ready. You don't want to use the same answers, but you want to have examples ready. So for no matter what kind of behavioral based question may come. See, we have another question. What is the best process when applying for internal jobs within the same company? Great question. So my rule of thumb is within the same company, you want to have been in your particular position at least 6 to 9 months. Sometimes companies have a policy on that and say a year. Some say 6 months, at least 6 months. A lot of times we want to get our foot in the door and then an effort to get to another position, but at least 6 to 9 months. Again, check your company policies. If some jobs are posted internally only, which means, definitely you can apply for them. Some are posted externally. Usually the rule of thumb too for companies is they can't post externally without posting internally. That's just a rule, not only an HR rule, but just something that companies do. You never want to surprise your current supervisor by applying for another job within the company. So you'll have to have the conversation with your current supervisor. You're interested in this particular job. You would like to have their support, because this is what happens when you apply for a job internally. Your current supervisor gets notified because you're internal. You usually don't have to submit all the same things like resume and all that kind of stuff. You just usually go on a site and apply. Your current supervisor is going to get notified. You want them to be supportive of you. It should not come to as a surprise to them that you're looking for a different position within the company, because you should be having conversations with them, your performance agreements, planning, performance plans, I love to use the term individual development plans, what you're looking for, how best to develop yourself. And so the best process is if you find a particular position, go through the same steps of making sure you are qualified, with the qualifications, and then also have that conversation with your current supervisor. If you can find out more about that particular job by asking people within an organization or who are close to that position you're applying for, what's it like, that kind of thing, without, people talk, so they may go back and say, oh, she's applying. That's why you want to talk to your supervisor first and then make that decision on whether or not you apply. But definitely talking to your current supervisor first is just not only professional, it's also very respectful. Okay, let's see, we have no more questions, so I'm going to flip over here. This is just a thank you for coming. Again, I'm going to stay on and keep recording for the micro internships and working remotely. If you do have to jump off, I totally understand. Will not take it personally. We're open for virtual appointments. Here are the contacts within the Business Career Center. We do have more webinars scheduled. We're doing one for graduate school. Be sure to answer the survey. And then this is the link for our YouTube channel. And I will send out the link or the slides to everyone who's on the call. So let me flip over to Chrome here. So hopefully, Handshake did log me out. Okay, so micro internships is a great way to build experience, and they are shorter in nature than a traditional internship that would be, 8 to 10 weeks, 8 to 12 weeks in the summer or during the school year. So I'm just switching over to my student account here. Okay, so if you're in Handshake, so the best way, Parker Dewey is the company that administers and kind of collects all the micro internships. So if you go into Handshake, you can go to the Career Center, and this should be your view. You want to go to Resources, and you want to go to Micro Internships. And then this is the link dedicated to TU. So you would set up and create a profile. So I've already done that. So I'm hoping it's still open. So once you create a profile, you come to this page that lists out the examples of work opportunities that can be done. Now, micro internships, most of them are going to be remote. There are some that are on site. I know that I'm working with a lot of employers right now within our region to get more and more listed, but they're short term. So they're paid. So that's a requirement to be on this site. They are paid internships. The rates are pretty good, about $15 to $18 an hour is what I was seeing earlier when I was looking. And they can be done, again, remotely, and it gives you that experience, and you can put that on your resume. So these are great ways to gain experience. I know we've had a few internships get canceled this summer because of what's going on in the economy and everything. But if you want to get some great experience, I highly recommend these micro internships, and there's no limit on how many you can do. So you could be doing projects, at the same time for 2 or 3 weeks, turning that in, and really building your portfolio that way. And so if you wanted to search, really you just kind of scroll down. I haven't found yet where you can actually search on different criteria again, but don't limit yourself. So take a look. So assistance web design and ads. And so this is your payment at the end. It tells you how many hours it would be. It's remote. And then you would just start applying for that. So here's some desired skills. So if you have any of these, doesn't matter that it's in Chicago, just apply for that particular project. So that's one way to use this system. Again, if you have a particular state you want to search, that's totally fine. But I would just go through all of them and look at some of the skills that are required. So competitive prospecting. So again, you may have the skill of research. This would be an awesome opportunity for you. So a great way to gain experience and to earn some money as well. Let's see. We have a question about this. I've applied for 2, but now they're gone and don't even show up under my applied tab. Is it possible they hired someone else? It gets removed from the applied section. That is correct. So if it is no longer under applied, that means it's been filled. And I do know they're working on that to give you a little bit more. Again, the ghosting, employers not reaching out directly. But that's usually what happens if it disappears from the applied. If you got it, it goes under hired. If you if you did not receive it, it would just be removed from applied. So there's a question. Here we go. How much should we write for the why are you qualified or why do you want this position questions? Should we treat it like a full cover letter or try to keep it short and sweet? I would err in between. So not a full-blown cover letter, but not so short and sweet that it just sounds like you're just applying for anything. So a good medium would be, why are you qualified? List out your skills. And so taking the cover letter approach, listing out your skills, listing out examples of the work you've done, and then why do you want this position to aid in, because you bring the skills to that particular position. So you don't want to keep it so short where it's like, because I'm great at this and I can do this, but again, talk about the value you're going to bring because you brought it to another organization or a company using those skills. Great questions. So last night I was looking at different articles on like remote work and stuff. So Forbes published a great article on, we do not want the video to play, on companies that you can look into for remote work. Some industries lend itself greatly to remote work. That's going to be more the IT field, a lot of the human resources field. Some accounting can be done that way. Research, prospecting, sales, marketing, graphic design. Again, if you think engineering, natural sciences, research is going to be a huge one where you don't need to actually be around people. Computer, again, software design, developer, help desk, that kind of thing. So these are just, and it's on, you can see the site there. So if you just Googled, oh my gosh, so many pop-ups, to find work from home during this COVID-19 crisis, there's some great sites. I haven't gone through all of them, but a lot of them look really good. And so this is one site, this is Outsourcely, and you can see some of the different positions that are there for you to apply to. Again, you sign up, be careful, you should not have to pay for these sites to find work. So just another option as you go through thinking about remote work and just filling this time as we're at home, you're working on your documents, working on getting ready to apply, that sort of thing. So that is all I had as we bring the webinar to a close. Again, I want to say thank you so much for joining me today and joining us for all of our webinars we've done. We definitely want to keep students and our alumni and our faculty and staff engaged, and you guys have been wonderful. So if you have any additional questions, feel free to type those in. I think we have one. Yes, I can actually send out this is asking if I can send the link to the Forbes article. I can totally do that. So I will include that in the link that has the information about the webinar. We'll also include the slides, and it will have the link to the Forbes article. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. I also want to thank especially the Center for Student Academic Success for partnering with us on this particular webinar. I hope you found it useful, and hope to see you at future webinars. Don't forget, if you missed one during the week, feel free to click on our YouTube channel. You can search TU Business Career Center and find all the webinars we've done this week, and be on the lookout for additional ones. As we get close to those reading days, we'll continue to have more webinars. So thank you again for your time, and have a great afternoon.